Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome. CTS230, Section 841 students for the first 8-week term of the fall 2017 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. This is the Networking 3, or the Cisco Networking Academy Scaling Networks V6 course. And this afternoon's video tutorial and solution set is going to be on Packet Tracer Activity 7.3.1.2. And these are some of the best activities because this is your Skills Integration Challenge, which is going to be focusing on EIGRP. So let's go ahead and get to the topology. You can see we've got quite a bit of work going on here. And again, the focus is all on EIGRP. Here's our addressing table. We're going to be doing some EIGRP for IPv4 and some EIGRP for IPv6. So let's dive in. Implement EIGRP on IPv4 enabled routers using Autonomous System 1. So it wants a single classful network address to advertise the loopback interfaces. And you can see we've got loopback interfaces here both on router 1 and on router 2. And then we've got our IPv4 edge. So this should look very similar to the two activities we've completed working our way up to the Skills Integration Challenge. We're going to use a wildcard mask to advertise the /30 networks between router 1, router 2, and the IPv4 edge. We're going to use the default passive interface method and only allow EIGRP updates out the active EIGRP serial interfaces. We've got a couple of other configuration tasks, but let's dive in here. So let's start on router 1. And let's give ourselves some additional space here. Make sure we can still see the, we didn't want that. I want to make sure that we can still see the loopback addresses and our topology. So here we are on router 1. Let's get a lay of the land here. We'll go from user exec with the enable command to privilege exec. And we're going to say show IP route. Let's see what kind of information we have here. So you can see that we've only got that locally connected or the directly connected networks. So if I was to say show run, is there any EIGRP currently configured here? And the answer is no. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get into global config and let's say router EIGRP1. Again, that autonomous system number needs to match between all of the EIGRP speaking routers. When we transition to OSPF, remember that that is not the case. That the process ID in OSPF is locally significant, but the AS number in EIGRP needs to be the same. So let me pull this up here. I'm going to bring it up so we can see. There we go. All right, so we're going to use a single classful network address to advertise the loopback interfaces. Well, we're on router 1, and you can see that they're 172.31s, and we know that 172.31s, those are Class B addresses. And since they all fall within that same 172.31 boundary, we can get away with saying 172.31.0.0, and I can simply hit enter. Right? Now, I don't need to put the wildcard mask in here. And keep in mind that on newer versions of iOS, you can actually put the subnet mask and it will do the work for you in terms of that wildcard mask conversion. So no need, because we want it to be a classful network statement. So it says use the wildcard mask to advertise the /30 networks. So let's take a look at that. Let's say do show IP interface brief. Whoops, IP interface brief. And the /30s for that network statement, we're going to go ahead and say network 172.31.6.0. And they're saying that these are /30, so we know that the two usables would be .1 and .2. The network ID is going to be .0, and our broadcast address will be .3. But remember, we need that wildcard mask in here. Whoops, I'm having some problems here. 0.0.0.3, keeping in mind that the wildcard mask is the inverse of the net mask in dotted decimal notation. And so that would be 255.255.255.252 as a net mask in dotted decimal notation. So we're at 8 points, and we should pick up maybe an additional point here, but it doesn't look like it. All right, so a single classful network address to advertise the /30 networks between R1, R2, and IPv4 edge, we're going to use the default passive interface. So we're going to say passive interface default. And that is going to make sure that we're only sending multicast hellos out to 224.0.0.10 for EIGRP on interfaces that we want. Now, what's interesting here is it says use default passive interface method to allow EIGRP updates out the active EIGRP serial interfaces. But by saying passive interface default, that's not enough. Remember, the passive interface default applies to all of the interfaces. We want EIGRP hellos to be going out the serial, 000 interface. So we say no passive interface serial 000 because that interface is going to be the interface over which we establish our neighbor adjacency with the IPv4 edge router. It says configure a directly attached, that's on IPv4 edge. So configure the serial interfaces to send hellos every 10 seconds. So let's get into interface serial 000 and say IP hello interval, hello interval, and for EIGRP autonomous system 1, and what do we want to set it to? Well, we want to set it to 10 seconds instead of the default of 5. So R1 and R2 should have a static route. We'll get that after we get the IPv4 edge done and verify that R1 and R2 can ping the IPv4 server. Well, we're going to have to get the IPv4 edge done first, but let's go ahead and transition over to R2, jump on the CLI for R2, and let's walk through the same steps that we just did on R1. So we'll go from user exec to privilege exec. And let's say show IP EIGRP interfaces. Anybody running EIGRP yet? No. What about show IP protocols? And so I'm showing you additional ways to check to see instead of that show run that we become familiar with on iOS, specifically on Packet Tracer, because it doesn't allow us to pick a specific section out. All right, so we want a single classful network to advertise the loopback addresses. Let's get into global config router EIGRP1. Let's go ahead and throw that passive interface default on here. And how about a no passive interface? And actually, I probably should check do show IP interface brief. And it is serial, of course, it's going to be different. So no passive interface, serial 001. All right, so we want a classful statement for that 10 dot. So I'm going to say network 10.0.0.0, right? To keep it classful, it would be 255.255.255.255. That is the classful wildcard mask for a Class A address. And again, remember, it's the inverse of the net mask in dotted decimal notation. And then it wanted a /30 statement to make the advertisement between the 10.10. What are we looking at? 8.0, 0.0.0.3, because again, that's the inverse. So let's take a look now. Let's say do show run, and let's see. So there is our EIGRP configuration so far. Passive interface default, no passive interface on the serial 001. We have our classful advertisement, or I should say our classful network statement, and then we have the classless network statement where we're putting in that wildcard mask for the 10.10.8 serial interface. All right, we did the default passive. Let's make sure, yeah, so interface serial 001. IP hello interval is going to be, hello interval for EIGRP1. We're going to set that to 10 seconds. And let me make sure, okay, good. And so then we're good with router 2. So now we're going to pull it all together here by bringing the IPv4 edge into the fold. So let's pull the IPv4 edge router up here. And we're going to have a little more work. So we're going to go from user exec to privilege exec with the enable command. And then again, show IP protocols. Do we have any protocols running? No. What about a show IP EIGRP interfaces? Nothing. All right, let's get into global config. Router EIGRP1 passive interface default. Now, I'm not going to issue the no passive interface yet. We're going to get everything set up and then we're going to bring it up. So let's say do show IP interface brief. I don't believe that we have any loopback addresses here. We don't, so there's nothing that we need to do there in terms of an advertisement. But we need to get the network statements in, and they need to be classless. In other words, we need to make sure we put that wildcard mask in there. Now, the only interfaces on which we're running EIGRP on the edge router are going to be serial 000 right here, and then serial 001. We are not, and you would not run EIGRP for the peering with the service provider, right? Remember, this is our internet connection here. And typically with a service provider, if you did run a routing protocol, it would be BGP. It's not going to be EIGRP. And again, this is from connectivity to service provider. If you're a little advanced, I'm not talking about layer 3 MPLS VPNs, right? So this is just the pure peering here with the internet provider. All right, so we're going to go with network 10.10.8.0, and we're going to be 0.0.0.3, right, because that's /30. And then we're going to say network 172.31.6.0, 0.0.0.3. And we're going to throw, I think, did we do passive interface default already? And then we'll say no passive interface, serial 000. And there we go. The adjacency comes up, and then no passive interface, serial 001. And that adjacency comes up. So everything is looking good. And let me check, configure a directly attached default route. Well, this is old hat, right? We just did this. So let's get out of the router EIGRP configuration mode, and let's come back to global config, where we're going to say IP route 0. And actually, before we do that, let me say do show IP interface brief. I can't remember the, okay, there we go. So IP route, and we get the quad zeros in here. And we're going to go out serial interface 010. And there's that very common warning that you see, right? If not a point-to-point interface, which this is, it could impact performance. So we're good to go there, but do we have connectivity yet from router 1 out to that server? And that server IP is server PT. Do we have the IP addressing here? It does not look like it. Let me check this out. Let's see what we've got here. All right, the IP 64.100.110. So similar to the IPv4 activity. So 64.100.110. So can we ping yet? Do show IP route. So do you see a route in here to the 64.100.1 network? We don't. And what we also don't see is that there is no gateway of last resort set. So that's a problem, right? Because we should see that DEX for IPv4 telling us that we have a default route that we have learned via EIGRP, but we're not going to have that until we redistribute that. And first, let's go ahead and ping 64.100.1.10. And I'm doing this so that it's cached in here or queued up in here, ready to go. And it's not going to work, right? Because we don't have a route there. Router 2, what about router 2? If I say do ping 10.64.100 or 1. No, what was it? It was, I can never remember the addresses. 64.100, sorry. 64.100.1.10. So we'll let that run because it's not going to work either until we come to the IPv4 edge and we say router EIGRP1 and I say redistribute static. Right? As soon as I say redistribute static, if we come back to router 1 now and we rerun this ping, it now works because do show IP route EIGRP, we should have, and it's not showing me the default there. That's interesting. And it does show it down here. That's interesting. That's a packet tracer thing. So you can see right here, we do have that default route, the administrative distance for external EIGRP information, and then here is my feasible distance to reach that default, or I should say the successor for the default route. All right, so the ping works from router 1, and let's check router 2, and we shouldn't have any issues there, and we do not. So let me take one last look right here. Every loopback address on R. So IPv4 Edge should be able to ping all of those loopback addresses. So let's get down to privilege exec 172.31.0.1. Okay, 0.129. And we're good. 131.1.1 and 131.1.129. We're good there. Let's ping 10.10.0.1, 1.1, 2.1, and 4.1. All right, so we've got connectivity across the board, and we've got 44 out of 90 possible points here. So now we're going to transition to our IPv6 setup. And again, very similar to what we're doing here with IPv4, it's just that the commands change ever so slightly. All right, so we'll pull up the router 3, and so let's make sure we've got this. We'll go from user exec to privilege exec into global config. Say do show IP protocols. Let's see what we've got. Nothing. Do show IPv6 protocols. This is why we have nothing. Do show IPv6 EIGRP interfaces, and nothing. So we're going to say IPv6 EIGRP, and we're going to get an error here. I'm sorry, router EIGRP 1. And why am I going to get an error? Exactly. Because IPv6 routing hasn't been enabled, right? So I need to make sure that I've got IPv6 routing enabled, IPv6 Unicast routing. Now, if you remember from the IPv6 EIGRP activity, we did not type that in, and it worked, right? Which means it had already been configured for us. So we need to make sure we get that IPv6 Unicast routing command in there, and I'm reading here. So implement EIGRP for IPv6, assign IPv6 edge. All right, so now we're putting some router IDs in, so let's take care of that first. So we're going to say EIGRP, we're going to say IPv6, router EIGRP1, and then we're going to say EIGRP router ID, EIGRP router ID for router 3 is simply 3.3.3.3. And configure a directly attached, they don't want any passive interface work done here. Directly attached default route. Okay, so let's go ahead and say do show run, because you know what I'm checking for is we're checking to see, and there it is, right? Shut down. What about a do show IPv6 protocols now? Right, so here we go. We can see some of the information we've got here. There's our K values. We can see the distance, right? The internal EIGRP administrative distance is 90, external is 170, and here it doesn't show if it's shut down. We actually had to say do show run and take a look to see if it's shut down. So let's say no shut, right? Because we want to bring that EIGRP process into the fold. And I'm looking here just to make sure that everything else looks good. All right, so now if I were to say do show IPv6 EIGRP interfaces, you'll notice it doesn't list any interfaces out. Why is that? Right, because is there a network command with IPv6? No, there is no network command. And so in order to get EIGRP running on an interface, the EIGRP process, we're going to say do show IP. And actually, do we have a bunch of... Yes, we've got a bunch of loopback addresses over there. So do show IP, IPv6 interface brief, right? So here's all of these loopback addresses, but the serial interface is the one where I'm going to go into interface serial 000 right now and say IPv6 EIGRP 1, right? Now, what about these loopback interfaces? If I were to say do show IPv6 EIGRP interfaces, you can see that it shows that we've got it running on the serial 000 interface. Now, in reading the instructions here, yeah, it doesn't tell you to do anything with those loopbacks, but it not directly, but it says the IPv6 server should be able to ping every loopback address. So we can't use a classful representation. So let's see, my guess is that what they're looking for us to do is to go into do show IPv6 interface brief, and it's what, loopback 0 through 4. And I wonder if they're looking for us to go into loopback 0 and to say IPv6 EIGRP1. Let's see if that's what they want. And it is, right? So the expectation here is that you're going to go into every single one of these loopback interfaces, interface loopback 1, because if we don't do this, EIGRP is not going to be advertising these loopback addresses, and as a result, the IPv6 edge router will not know about them. So if I pull the edge router back up, or let's say pull it up initially here, whoops, let's watch and see what happens as I say, show IPv6 route EIGRP. And actually, I apologize, we haven't even configured that. So let's, all right, we'll finish these loopbacks up. So the loopbacks are going to appear once we get EIGRP configured over there. So let's go to interface loopback 2, and then interface loopback 3, and that should do it for this router. So we'll go ahead and say end, and we'll throw a quick write mem in there. And let's pull up the edge router now, and let's walk through the configuration for the edge router so that we can see some things being learned here. So again, we'll go into global config. I'm doing IPv6, so it's got to be IPv6 unicast routing, and then we're going to say IPv6 router EIGRP1. No passive interface called for here, but we need to make sure we get that EIGRP router ID in, and for the edge, it's going to be 1.1.1.1. Now remember, if I ping 1.1.1.1, am I going to get a response? No. Remember, that's the router ID. It is not, and in this case specifically, it is not a viable IPv4 destination. Okay, so, or we're not going to be able to reach 1.1.1.1 because it's the router ID. It is not an interface or a physical or loopback on this router. All right, so we've got that taken care of. Let's say no shut, and we're going to go do show IP interface brief into interface, do show IPv6 interface brief, and we're looking for serial 0, and which one is it going to be? 000 and 001. And we're going to say IPv6 EIGRP1, and what we should see happen here is that adjacency should pop up between the R3 router and the IPv4 edge, but it might be that I'm on a different interface here, 0001. And there we go. Okay, so it was serial 001. So now we've got this adjacency. If I say do show IPv6 route EIGRP, and it doesn't like that with IPv6. That is a legitimate command, which in a previous video did not work as well. But take a look here. You can see these loopback addresses, the 2001 DB8:1 A000, A100, these /72s. So these are being learned via EIGRP. And are we doing a static route here? We are configuring a directly attached static route. So let's do that. So IPv6 route ::/0. And I got to get that outgoing interface, which is going to be serial. It's going to be this one here, the cafe 010. And so serial 010, right? So there we go. We've got that information entered in, but we need more than that, right? We need IPv6 router EIGRP1, and we need to say redistribute static so that this information gets pushed down to these routers here. So now when I say show IPv6 route EIGRP, and we miss out there, we simply say show IP route EIGRP, and I'll go all the way to the bottom, but then we're going to work our way back to the top where we can see that we now have received the external EIGRP default route. So at this point, and we'll pull the PT server up here, and this is going to be cafe 1000::A. So let's get that queued up in here right now. So ping 2001:db8: cafe 1000::A. And we've got reachability. I'm actually going to copy this. We've got reachability between router 3 and that server out there hanging off the internet. And let's come back here and let's rerun the command here. On router 4, which we have not configured yet, is that going to work? And the answer is no. It doesn't have any of the routing information that should be shared between the two. All right, so let me make sure that we've got this. So let's come on to router 4 here. Let's get into global config. IPv6 unicast routing so that we can configure the EIGRP. IPv6 router EIGRP1. And we're going to set that EIGRP router ID, and I believe it's 4.4.4.4. Let me double check that over here. Verify. Yeah, so 4.4.4, configure directly attached default route. We did that and propagated it. Should allow a default external route in the routing domain. Should show. Okay, they do. All right, good. So we're good there. So now we're going to say no shut, right? We need to bring that process, that EIGRP process up. And let's say do show IPv6 interface brief. And let me give myself a little more room to work with here. And we are looking at the loopback, so serial 001, so interface serial 001, and we're going to say IPv6 EIGRP 1. As you can see, that brings that adjacency up between router 4 and the IPv6 edge. So now if I say do show IPv6 route, and I'll leave the EIGRP off this time, take a look at that. We now have that default route, but what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we're advertising those loopback addresses. So interface loopback 0, and I apologize, do show IPv6 interface brief. It's not 0. It is, okay, they're making it a little more difficult. 8, 9, and 10. So let's say interface loopback 8, and then we're going to pull back our IPv6 EIGRP1 command. Then we're going to go into interface loopback 9, recall the same command, interface loopback 10, recall the same command, and then interface loopback 11. And we're going to recall that same command. So now all of the loopback addresses are now being advertised. So if I was to say do show IPv6 EIGRP interfaces, take a look at that, right? So this shows the interfaces on which EIGRP is running. So I'm going to do something unconventional here. We're going to say IPv6 router EIGRP1, and I'm going to say default, or I'm sorry, passive interface default, and then I'm going to say no passive interface serial 001. Right now, I'm not sure if we're losing points for that or not, but it doesn't make sense, right, to not passive the loopback interfaces. And the same is true up here on router 3. It doesn't make sense not to say IPv6 router EIGRP1 and to say passive interface default and then no passive interface serial 000. Do show IPv6 interface brief. I think it's 000. Ah, oh, wait. Is it? Yeah, it is 000. Okay. All right, so it doesn't make sense not to do that. So we're going to throw that in there. So now when I say do show IPv6 EIGRP interfaces, right, you can see that we still see these interfaces, and the only interface out which we have appear is going to be that serial interface. Okay, so we've got all of that entered in. Now, verify they can ping the IPv6 server. So both of these guys should be able to ping that IPv6 server. So let's drop that command in here, and let's see. So that works there. We'll drop the command in here. And we can ping the IPv6 server. Now, the IPv4 edge, I'm sorry, IPv6 edge, I think we're going to ping a couple addresses, and that's going to be about it. So do ping 2001:db8:1:1:A123:1. Okay, and then I guess we'll make it easy here. A, and then it's, what is it, 100, 200, 300. So then we're going to go 100, and then 200, and then 300. Right, so we've got connectivity there. Let's try down south here, and this is going to be Baker 80, Baker 80. Everything else is the same, I think. Yeah, and then Baker 90. And then is it A and B? It is A and B. All right, so then we're going to go A and B. And you can see, even doing the passive interface default and doing a no passive only on the serial interface, the reachability is still there, and that's what we want. So let me come back over here now and take a look, because we missed 6 points. And my guess is it's a command that I should have run that I didn't. Let me double check here. Use a classful network mask to advertise the loopback interfaces. Use a wildcard mask to advertise the /30s. Use the default passive interface and only allow EIGRP updates out the active serial interfaces. We did that. Directly attach default route. We did that. Configure the serial interfaces between our to send hellos every 10 seconds. We did that. R1 and R2 should have a default route. All right, let's see. Assign IPv6 edge. We did the router IDs. Let's make sure I did the router IDs. Do show run. And we've got our router IDs in there. So let's see what it doesn't like. It doesn't like something I did. Maybe I typoed something. Ah, okay. So it was anticipating. Oh, I did not do it on the v4 edge. Okay, so I did it on the 2, and I'm talking what I did was the hello interval. I forgot to put it on the IPv4 edge. Let's knock that out right now. We'll go into global config, interface serial 000, IP hello interval, EIGRP 1 is going to be 10. And so that should probably give us 3 points is my guess. And let's bail out of this here by saying close. And yep, it gave us the 3 points. And now we're going to go ahead and do that on the other interface. Totally overlooked that. So interface serial 001 and IP hello interval EIGRP 10. All right, well, that is going to wrap up this skills integration challenge. Again, having us pull all of our EIGRP information into a single activity here and to apply everything at one time. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you on Tuesday.